Hello and welcome back to my channel. We are back doing videos again, talking about movies. This time we're doing the movies that I watched in August. To start off the month, I watched Moonlight, and I find it so stupid that how long it took me to watch this film, but honestly it was worth the wait. The thing that interests me the most about this movie is that it's split up into 3 different acts, and each act sort of explores the characters a bit more each time, and it kind of feels like its own story. But for me, the second act is the strongest. We get more depth into the character itself, and it's a bit more emotional. Has the best acting performances in my opinion, even though with the first act Mahershala Ali is incredible even for the short amount of time that he's in it. But for me, the second act, Ashton Sanders, who plays the teenage protagonist Chiron, he really steals the show for me. It is worth mentioning the third act. The last 10 minutes are incredibly moving. I feel like I didn't even move in the last 5 to 10 minutes. And it's also hard not to mention the cinematography. It's probably been said a billion times and by so many other people how beautiful it is, but it is honestly one of a kind. And then I watched War of the Worlds, which is the 2025 reboot of the original story by Wells with a sort of modern twist, and it's got this whole perspective through a computer, and it's just terrible. It's really bad, but I have to say that it's probably the most enjoyable movie that I've watched this whole year. Ice Cube's performance and delivery are really what make this just a shit show, but it's hard not to think that we're being played when we watch this movie, and maybe it was just never meant to be taken seriously. So it's quite hard to criticize a movie like this when it's so bad that it's so good, which is kind of how I felt when I watched Morbius a few years ago. I won't go into deep analysis of this because it's pointless, but I do just urge everyone to go watch it if they can. And then I watched Sex, Lies and Videotape, which is a 1989 film from Steven Soderbergh, which focuses on 4 different characters and surrounds an affair and a troubled marriage. My knowledge of Soderbergh's films is very limited. I've only watched Ocean's 11, which I think is quite overrated. It's not my sort of taste. And then I also watched Presence, which just came out last year, which is sort of like a horror drama, and it was an interesting concept, and I thought it was executed quite well, so it kind of brought me in a bit more. But with this movie, I think it's very well written. It is clearly heavy on dialogue, which kind of helps with the performances of both James Spader and Annie McDowell, who clearly carry this film with their characters' performances. That being said, there's really not a lot that happens within the story between each character that kept me engaged up until maybe the last 20 minutes where it all kind of kicks off. I also understand it wasn't the focus, but the movie didn't look interesting to me. It was quite visually boring, and it did take me out at times, but I had a fun time watching this. Then I watched Weapons. If you haven't already seen it, Weapons is a recent 2025 release, focuses on a class of school kids that all go missing one night, and it's the effects and the consequences that it has on the parents and the town as a whole, and focuses on the teachers as well. Weapons is truly a special movie to me, and it kind of feels like a one of a kind. It's something that we've never seen before, especially in the horror genre. There's been sort of a resurgence in this creative horror that explores narratives a bit further in recent years, especially with movies like Sinners, which came out this year, and Longlegs, Nope, The Substance. I mean, the list goes on, and directors are making more creative stories, and I'm honestly here for it. The way that Zach Cregger structures this movie is so unique, and I love how he is able to dive into each and every character that he introduces in the story, and how they all sort of link up to the same point at the end to make this ending really, really effective and impactful. The cast is incredibly stacked with great performances, specifically Julia Garner. She's fantastic, and I've just started watching Ozark purely because of her. I'm just so intrigued by her acting performances and her stylistic choices and her diversity as well, especially with movies like Fantastic Four, which came out this year. I mean, it's so interesting to see how many different characters she can play. Josh Brolin also does so well at portraying grief and desperation within a character, especially during the dream sequences. That were some of my highlights during the film. But a standout is Austin Abrams, who plays the homeless crackhead and brings comedy and a lightheartedness to this movie, which I completely admire, but it still doesn't take out the terrifying nature from the story. Yeah, I just thought this movie was amazing. It was definitely one of my favourites of the year so far. I rewatched Wicked while I was on holiday a few weeks ago, and I wasn't able to properly focus on this on a third rewatch, but when I could, I somehow loved it even more than the last time. I won't go into much detail about this, but there's something new about this movie every single time that I love and fascinates me, and it's just great filmmaking. Then I watched Wrong Turn. This is a 2021 reboot, I'm assuming, of the franchise with the same title. The story kind of focuses on a group of friends who go on a hike in the Appalachian Mountains, and they stumble across a cult community, and the movie is just the consequences of meeting these people. I watched this movie with my friends, and you think it's one of those movies that you can poke fun at, but there wasn't a lot to pick out because it really just wasn't good. The narrative is just extremely forgettable, the characters are underdeveloped, and it's just really awfully written, and it's just got stupid and predictable plot lines, which is exactly how horror movies shouldn't be. Then I watched Barbarian. Coming off the back of Weapons, I realised that I hadn't actually watched Barbarian before I watched Weapons, and I'm not really sure why, considering it's been out for a good few years now. This is another horror created by Zach Cregger, which focuses on a character staying in an Airbnb. I won't give any more information because going into this film, this is the knowledge that I had and nothing else, and it truly made the experience a lot more worthwhile for me, as I was able to just explore where the plot sort of goes and subverts my expectations of this film from the start. As I said previously about the structure of Weapons, Barbarian follows suit and almost probably paved the way for Weapons, and I love how these different characters come to meet in the central point of the plot. The acting is great, it's written very well, and I really enjoy the plot, and I really do have high hopes for the future of horror genre, especially if it's in Cregger's hands. I then watched the Rocky Horror Picture Show. I watched this as a re-release in the cinema for its 50-year anniversary, and I'm really glad I did. It's clear to say that Rocky Horror has paved the way for queer cinema, and it was so incredibly ahead of its time, which I was just so fascinated by. I did find myself sort of lost during the beginning, especially after the introduction of the character of Rocky himself, but it started to pick up, and characters were explored more further in the film. But then during the stage performance near the end of the film, that's where I was truly mesmerised, especially during Frankenfurter's performance of the song I'm Going Home, which made me feel really emotional, and I felt like there was some sort of double meaning to the song, but I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm looking into it a bit too much. Tim Curry was definitely the standout in this throughout, and he plays such a sexy, extravagant character, so yeah, I really enjoyed this. And then I watched Eddington. After Beau Was Afraid, I didn't really know how to anticipate this release from Ari Aster. Not to say that it was a bad movie, but it just didn't really reflect his past two movies, Hereditary and Midsommar, which are two movies that I like a lot and definitely stand out within the horror genre in the modern day, as I said earlier on with films like Weapons. However, after this watch, Eddington is probably his second best movie that he's ever released, and I genuinely mean that. It's no surprise that Eddington has a lot to say about American society and how the right wing perceive things. However, I did fear that the message that the movie is trying to get across, people will interpret in the wrong way, even though it's so incredibly straightforward. And this message is that the right wing Republicans are just fucking idiots. I really do admire how Ari Aster portrays the protagonist of Joe Cross, who's played by Joaquin Phoenix, as really dramatic and as if the whole world is turning against him, which in the way I see it is how these people behave and act and how they perceive the world around them. I could go on and on about the narrative and the message that it's trying to get across, especially towards the end of the film, but I could make a whole other video on that, explaining my thoughts. Nevertheless, Joaquin Phoenix is incredible, Emma Stone and even Pedro Pascal are also all great. It's also visually astounding, the cinematography is great, And yeah, another one of my favourites of the year. I rewatched Dunkirk in IMAX, somehow only making it the second movie I've seen in the IMAX, and it's still one of the greatest movies I've ever seen. I was so close to making this my favourite Nolan movie. Possibly, I'm still debating it, but I just need to see Interstellar that one more time to cement that. Dunkirk is intense, groundbreaking and thrilling from start to finish, and there's not a moment during the movie where you can sit still and feel comfortable. There's just constantly something going on. I mean, it's been said time and time again, but the cinematography in this is just mental, and specifically toward the ending, yeah, it's just perfect. And then I watched Four Lions. After watching such a devastating film the same day, I decided to put on something lighthearted and funny, and it didn't disappoint. This is a movie that has been constantly recommended to me, and people are bugging me to watch it, so I thought I did. I got about halfway through this until I realised that Jesse Armstrong had written it, and for some reason it made it so much more funny, and it's just made a lot more sense with the way it's shot. Four Lions doesn't fail to execute funny moments, and it almost feels like a movie you shouldn't laugh at, but the satirical nature of the characters being so stupid and dumbfounded reminds you that it's okay, and there's a deeper meaning behind it. As I was saying, what I admire about this movie is that it's so brave and in its attempt to make its audience laugh, especially around the time it was being made. But at the same time, there is something so unbelievably funny about poking fun at the extremes that these group of guys go through to do something so unrealistic, purely to make certain audiences feel stupid about the way that they think. Each character has their own personality that is well developed in the script, and purely just by the way they communicate to each other is enough to make you laugh. Then I watched Caught Stealing in the cinema. This is a new movie from Aronofsky, off the back of the debatable success of The Whale, which was released in 2022. When I watched this movie, I wasn't really caught up in picking out parts of the production and cinematography, because the story was just really enticing, and Austin Butler does such a good job playing this sort of passionate, chaotic character that I found myself ignoring everything else. A lot of it did feel like Aronofsky's typical gritty nature, especially in terms of the cinematography, yet it did feel very different to what I've seen. I've only seen The Whale, which I really didn't enjoy, and Black Swan, which I thought was amazing. The dialogue is a bit cliche at times, and I would definitely say that Matt Smith's character is a bit cheesy. However, for the most part, it was funny, but in some parts it was quite dark, and it made for a good story overall. What we can definitely take from this is that Austin Butler is a true movie star and is extremely diverse with his ability, and he just has such a good future within Hollywood. And then I watched Dead Poets Society. This was my first time watching this, and still really affected by it. I tried going into this with an open mind because I knew it was obviously a sad movie, but it didn't really make a difference because I was crying my eyes out by the end of it. I just can't really fathom how a coming of age movie like this is written so well, and each of the characters, each of the schoolboys have their own sort of development arc throughout the movie, which all rounds up in the final scene. Robin Williams plays a fantastic teacher as soon as he's introduced, and you're constantly rooting for him throughout. Robert Sean Leonard, who plays Neil, is also great, and I love his story, but to me, a young Ethan Hawke is who truly steals the show, as his character is so broken and lost, and he just does so well at presenting that. Yeah, I can see this being a favourite of mine the more and more I watch it. And then finally I rewatched Back to the Future for about the 100th time. I'll do a video talking about my favourite movies at some other time, but yeah, this is definitely in my top 5 best movies of all time. It's a timeless classic and probably one of the most fun and entertaining movies, and it defines cinema. So yeah, that's all the movies that I watched this month, and I'll probably be making this a frequent thing every month. I'll try and aim to give some sort of update on what I'm watching so that you guys can go and watch these films. If there's anything that you want me to watch, leave it in the comments below. I will definitely take recommendations. So yeah, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.